Hello, my name is Jeff Campbell. I am an Agile coach with Rebel Alliance in Sweden, meaning I go around to organizations and I help them with Agile adoptions, sometimes short-term teaching style assignments. More frequently, what I prefer to do is work with teams long-term in their Agile adoptions. I'm here today to talk to you about retrospectives and more specifically an anti-pattern that I very commonly see in retrospectives. So the concept of a retrospective at first glance seems very easy and pretty clear. We meet every so often, depending on what our sprint cadence is, every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, once a month. We talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and how we're going to change it so that it goes better the next time. And that seems like it should have a good impact on our problem, but actually it's very possible for you to have retrospectives like this over and over and over again and see no impact as a result of having them. It's a very common thing that I see, and that's because of an anti-pattern that has been titled the coffee room whining pattern. Coffee room whining is an anti-pattern that is very, very common in retrospectives and fairly easy to identify if you're suffering from it. So first I'm going to lay out a few of the symptoms of coffee room whining. The first symptom of coffee room whining is that we talk about everything that's wrong in our organizations. Doesn't matter how big our organization is, how many people are in it, how many problems we have. When we do coffee room whining, we're able to identify all of these. So we end up with a big mass of stuff that's horribly, horribly wrong. And then once we've identified everything that is wrong, we invariably find after that that it's somebody else's fault. And this is actually not as unreasonable as it sounds. We're responsible adults. If something was within our sphere of control, we probably would have done something about it already if it was a problem. So it's not that odd that we start blaming other people when we identify all these things that are wrong. And then the third and final symptom of coffee room whining is we finish the coffee, we finish the discussion we're having, we go back to our desk, and absolutely nothing changes as a result of the discussion that we've just had. If coffee room whining is actually that's not entirely true. There is one thing that changed. We're a little bit more bitter than we were before we engaged in the coffee room whining session, but not something that's terribly a good change. So if you're having coffee room whining sessions in your retrospectives, you can very easily identify it. You'll go into your retrospective, say every 2 weeks, and you'll create a list of 15 or 20 things that are wrong. You will hand that list off to a manager or to your scrum master and say these things need to be fixed. And then you'll come back a few weeks later and you'll engage in the same activity over again. You'll list all those same things again and you'll hand the list off again. And you do this over and over and over and over again until eventually somebody plucks up the courage to say, you know what, why do we keep having these meetings? Nothing ever changes as a result of them, which is not at all unreasonable because this is generally the result of coffee room whining. So an excellent mental model to think of a retrospective, the pattern to the anti-pattern as it were, is to think of a retrospective as the exact opposite of coffee room whining. So instead of talking about everything that's wrong in our organization, in a retrospective we focus on one thing. We find whatever our biggest constraint or our biggest bottleneck is today and we focus on that because there's a lot of reasons we do this. One of the big ones is our organizations have problems that are often interlinked to each other. One thing supports another. So let's say we discuss 10 things and we alleviated the first one and well, maybe the other 9 aren't all that important anymore. We've just spent all that time and energy discussing something that's no longer relevant. Also, it's really overwhelming to talk about everything that's wrong in our organization. It's a lot more motivating to focus on one issue being the biggest issue that we have. And as theory of constraints tells us, whatever the largest bottleneck we have in our process is today, that's the thing we should be focusing on because everything else that we optimize is a sub-optimization. So then the second thing we do in coffee room whining, I've already granted you that it is indeed somebody else's fault, but in a retrospective, we always focus on what we can do about the issue. Now you might think, well, we already decided that it wasn't my fault. This is true, but actually no matter what issue you're facing, There's always one of three things that you can do about it, that you personally can do about it. Sometimes, not nearly as often as we might like, you can fix it. You can do a root cause analysis, you can find out that it is indeed within your sphere of control, and you can fix it. This doesn't happen nearly as frequently as we might like. Much more frequently than that, we can find ways to minimize the issue. We can find ways to lessen its impact on us, put processes or systems in place to lessen the impact of the issue on us. This we can do a lot more frequently. But even if we can't do either of these things, one thing we can always do is we can inform about the problem. We can make the problem more visible. Now, when I say inform, I don't mean send an email off to some manager somewhere and say, this is broken, fix it. I mean inform as in make the issue more visible, perhaps, so it's harder to ignore. Or if you really do require help from another person and you need to inform them, go and speak to them and say, we've identified this, what can I do to help you to address this issue? So you can always take one of these three steps to talk about what you personally can do about the problem. And then finally, because we behave in this manner instead of the other manner, what we're able to do is propose concrete changes. Specific things that we can do to try to action our issue over the course of the next 2 weeks before the next retrospective. The great thing about a retrospective, as opposed to, say, a project post-mortem, is the fact that we are having them so frequently. And the fact that we're having them so frequently has an excellent side benefit that we don't actually have to find the correct solution to our problem. We only have to come up with experiments. We don't need the right answer. We just need to come up with something that we think will have an impact on the issue. Something that we can try out for the next 2 weeks, experiment with. After 2 weeks has gone by, or whatever your sprint cadence is, after that time has gone by, we're going to look at it again, and we're going to say, did it have an impact on our problem? Yes, it did. Then we'll probably keep that experiment in place as a long-term change. No, it didn't. Well, then we'll try another experiment. This not only makes it easier to start trying to find ways to address issues, but it helps get to improve the buy-in for people addressing the issue, because you don't need everybody to agree to what the change is. All you need is everybody to agree to try out the change, to give it a chance, and assess it at the end of the next sprint and see if it was successful or not. So nobody's claiming to be right or wrong or have the correct answer. We're just saying this is something we think is worth trying. If you think of this retrospective, of your retrospectives in this manner as opposed to the coffee room whining model, I think that you will find you have a lot more effective retrospectives. I know it's been absolutely career changing for me. Thank you very much.